The machines were beeping steadily when my father said it. Not angrily, not even loudly, just enough for everyone in the room to hear. Well, he sighed, staring at the ceiling of the hospital room, I guess this is what happens when you spend your life failing at everything. My aunt shifted in her chair. A nurse pretended to adjust the IV. No one corrected him. I stood at the foot of the bed, hands folded, listening while he kept talking. Your brother would have handled things differently, he added. He always had ambition. You never really amounted to much. He said it like a diagnosis. Final. Certain. On the tray beside him sat a clipboard with his chart clipped neatly on top. Under it, barely visible, was a consent form with a signature he'd never looked at closely. Mine. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I didn't remind him who had been answering the calls, signing the forms, or sitting through meetings he didn't even know had happened. I just stood there, quiet, invisible, exactly how he'd always preferred me. Because what my father didn't know, lying there so sure of my failure, was that the reason he was still in that room had nothing to do with him. There was a secret buried in his medical file, a decision made weeks earlier, a donation he'd never imagined I was capable of. And once the doctor walked back in, the story he'd told about me my entire life was about to collapse. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you this. What's the cruelest thing a parent has ever said to you when you were already at your lowest? 2 weeks earlier, no one was watching me. That's why it was easy. The hospital corridor smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee, the kind of smell that settles into your clothes and follows you home. I stood at the end of the hall outside an office marked Donor Coordination, wearing a plain jacket, hair pulled back, nothing about me signaling urgency or importance. Inside, everything was quiet and precise. Forms stacked perfectly, voices low, the weight of decisions that don't get taken lightly. I approached the desk and spoke carefully, keeping my voice even. I need to update a consent file, I said, and I have a question about anonymity. The coordinator nodded, already reaching for a form, assuming this was routine. That's how these places work. Life-changing choices made through ordinary sentences. I filled in my name, signed where indicated, checked a box most people never notice. Anonymous donor, financial coverage approved, no disclosure without medical necessity. No speeches, no tears, no dramatic moment. Just a pen moving across paper while machines hummed somewhere down the hall. When I handed the forms back, the coordinator glanced at me briefly, polite, professional, unaware that the man in room 614 would never know who had just made his treatment possible. I didn't ask for thanks. I didn't ask to be seen. I walked out exactly the way I'd come in, quiet, unnoticed, leaving behind a decision that would change everything. I learned early that being quiet kept the peace. I'm 34, and I work in medical administration, paperwork, approvals, coordination, the kind of job that only gets noticed when something goes wrong. I spend my days making sure other people's care doesn't fall through the cracks, even though no one ever remembers my name. That's always been my role. In my family, I was never the success story. I was the comparison point, the one my father referenced when he wanted to motivate my brother. Don't end up like them. The disappointment that didn't cause trouble just quietly failed to impress. I learned to sit through dinners where my achievements were summarized in a sentence and my brothers were debated like breaking news. I learned to smile when people forgot to ask about my life. I learned to become smaller so things wouldn't get uncomfortable. Over time, that teaches you skills no one brags about. You learn how to regulate your face when words are meant to cut. You learn how to endure conversations that erase you. You learn when silence is safer than honesty. To people like my father, invisibility looks like weakness, but invisibility is how you watch, how you listen, how you move when no one thinks you matter enough to stop you. It wasn't resignation, it was survival. The first nurse barely looked up. She took the folder from my hands, flipped through it quickly, and nodded like this was just another administrative task to check off before lunch. Her voice stayed neutral, practiced. "Have a seat. Someone will be with you shortly." I sat. The air smelled sharply of antiseptic and plastic curtains. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beats in a slow, steady rhythm, too steady to ignore. When the nurse returned, her pace had changed. She paused mid-step, glanced down at the papers again, then back at me. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not with suspicion, but with focus. She reread a line, then turned the page back like she was making sure she hadn't missed something the first time. "Just a moment," she said, quieter now. A few minutes passed. The beeping continued. The smell of disinfectant felt stronger, heavier. Then a senior doctor approached, not rushed, not casual. He asked my name, pronounced it carefully, asked for the folder. As he read, the room seemed to shrink. Conversations nearby lowered, movement slowed. The gravity shifted. "This way," he said. I followed him into a smaller room away from the hallway traffic. The door closed softly behind us, sealing out the noise. The hum of machines was muted here, but still present, constant, watchful. He placed the folder on the table between us. "Thank you for coming in," he said, his tone now deliberate. "There are some details we need to confirm." For the first time since I'd walked into the hospital, I wasn't just another name on a clipboard. I was essential. The steady beeping in the room pulled a memory loose. Not a dramatic one, not a single moment, just a pattern I'd lived inside for years. I was 14 the first time my father said it out loud. "You just don't have that drive," he told me, shaking his head while my brother's trophy sat on the table between us. "Some people are born hungry, others are comfortable failing." He didn't yell, he never had to. His disappointment was quiet, constant, worse than anger because it sounded reasonable. Every report card came with a comparison. Every milestone came with a reminder of who did it better. When my brother succeeded, it was proof of effort. When I did well, it was luck. When I struggled, it was character. Success was redefined every time I got close to it, shifted just far enough that I couldn't reach it. The rule was simple, even if no one admitted it. Worth had to be earned, love had to be performed, so I stopped trying to win it. I learned to nod instead of argue, to swallow words before they became problems, to accept that if I stayed quiet and useful, at least I wouldn't be a disappointment out loud. I told myself his words didn't matter, but I carried them anyway, right up until that moment, sitting in a room that smelled like antiseptic, realizing how long I'd let his definition of failure shape my silence. "I need to be very clear with you," the doctor said. That was how I knew this wasn't routine. He turned the file toward me and rested his hand on it, not to hide it, but to anchor what he was about to say. My name was printed at the top, clean and unmistakable. You were listed as the primary donor and as the financial benefactor. I felt my chest tighten, not with fear, but with the weight of finally hearing it out loud. The donation had been made anonymously, no family disclosure, no automatic notifications. The hospital honored that unless medical necessity required otherwise, which meant my father had no idea. The doctor flipped a page. "You authorized full coverage," he said. "You approved the match. And you signed the consent that allows treatment to continue." He looked at me then, not like a patient's relative, but like someone who understood responsibility. "Without that," he added, tapping the page once, "we wouldn't be having this conversation." It landed quietly. All this time, I'd thought I was on the sidelines, waiting, watching, hoping. I wasn't. I wasn't a visitor. I wasn't background. I wasn't even optional. I was the reason the room existed the way it did. And my father, lying just a few doors down, had no idea that the person he'd spent years calling a failure was the one holding the line between recovery and nothing at all. The realization didn't arrive all at once. It settled. For years, I'd moved through my life as if my father's voice carried weight simply because it was loud, confident, familiar. Like authority was something he owned by default. But sitting there, looking at that donor form with my name on it, I understood something quietly devastating. His power had always been assumed. No title, no achievement, no dominance, just repetition and volume. I had believed it because I'd been taught to. The hospital stay, the machines, the doctors, the carefully measured hope, none of it existed because of him. It existed because I had said yes, because I had signed, because I had stepped forward when no one was watching. I traced the edge of the donor ID card with my thumb. It wasn't proof of sacrifice, it was proof of agency. The hurt didn't disappear, but it loosened its grip. In its place came clarity, clean, steady, unshakable. I wasn't waiting for his approval. I was the reason there was anything left to approve. He didn't stop. Even lying there, even surrounded by machines doing the work his body couldn't, my father found the energy to remind me who he thought I was. "You know," he said, staring past me instead of at me, "if you'd made better choices, you wouldn't be hovering around hospitals like this." Condescending, familiar. "You always gravitated towards small things, safe jobs, no ambition. That's why you end up here." Dismissive now, reducing everything I'd done to a character flaw. I stayed quiet, watching the numbers rise and fall on the monitor beside him. Then he scoffed. "All this effort," he said, shaking his head, "for nothing. You don't even contribute anything meaningful." Cruel, final, confident. And there it was, the overreach. Because the thing he was insulting, the thing he dismissed so easily, was the only reason his heart was still beating in that room. He didn't know it yet, but every word he used to erase me was colliding in real time with the truth his certainty couldn't survive. I didn't correct him. That was the choice. I stayed where I was, hands still, face neutral, letting his words pass through the room without giving them anything to land on. I'd learned long ago that arguing with him only fed the version of himself he wanted to believe in. Around us, the hospital kept moving. A nurse stepped in, checked a line, made a note on the chart without looking at either of us. Another staff member paused outside the door, glanced at the monitor, then down the hall, silent coordination happening where I wasn't expected to notice. But I did, because I'd already decided. Not in anger, not in reaction, in advance. I knew when the truth would surface. I knew who would say it, and I knew I didn't need to be the one to deliver it. That's the thing about restraint. It isn't passive, it's precise. So I stood there, quiet and steady, while the room prepared itself for a reality my father had spent his life refusing to imagine. And I waited. The door opened, and the room shifted. My father straightened slightly in the bed, the way he always did when someone he considered important walked in. His voice changed before the doctor even spoke. "Well?" he asked. "What's the update?" The doctor glanced at the monitors, then at the chart, unhurried. My aunt leaned forward. A nurse paused near the door. Everyone's attention narrowed to the center of the room. This was the moment my father understood. The moment he expected answers, reassurance, control. I stayed where I was. I didn't step in. I didn't speak up. I didn't soften anything. The doctor took a breath, eyes moving briefly to me before returning to my father. And for the first time, my silence wasn't absence. It was permission. "Before we continue," the doctor said, "there's something that needs to be acknowledged." That got my father's attention. The doctor turned a page in the chart and spoke clearly, professionally. No drama, no hesitation. "We want to thank the donor who made this treatment possible," he said. "The organ match was approved, the financial coverage was secured, the experimental therapy was cleared because of that contribution." My father nodded, impatient. Yes, yes, whoever it was. The doctor didn't look at him. He looked at me. "The donor chose to remain anonymous," he continued, "but disclosure is medically appropriate at this stage." The room went very still. "The donor is your child." My father's smile faltered, just slightly, like a glitch. "That's not possible," he said automatically. "They didn't—" The doctor held up the file. "The consent was signed weeks ago," he said. "The match was approved under their name. Without it, this treatment would not be happening." My father turned to me. I didn't move. All the words he'd said, failure, useless, nothing, hung in the air between us, suddenly heavy, suddenly irreversible. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. There was nothing left to rewrite. Because the truth had already been spoken, and it didn't need his permission to exist. You can hear a room change when authority shifts. The doctor didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "This treatment," he said evenly, "is dependent on the donor's consent remaining in place. It always has been." My father laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "That doesn't mean anything. I'm the patient." The doctor met his eyes. "It means everything," he replied. "Without that consent, the treatment stops. There is no alternative path available at this time." My father tried to recover, straightening his shoulders like posture could bring back control. "So what, now I'm supposed to be grateful?" he scoffed. "This is family. It doesn't count." The doctor's tone stayed calm, but something final entered it. "This isn't about family," he said. "It's about medical authorization, and that authorization came from them." He gestured toward me, not dramatically, just factually. The room absorbed it all at once. The man who had dominated every conversation, every dinner table, every memory, was suddenly not the one deciding anything. The story my father had told about himself, about me, about who mattered, collapsed under the simplest weight of truth, and there was no argument loud enough to rebuild it. He shook his head at first. "No," my father said, staring at the ceiling, "that's not right. You must be mistaken." Denial came easily to him. It always had. Then his voice rose, sharp with anger. "This is ridiculous. You think this makes you important? You think signing a paper changes who you are?" The machines kept humming. No one interrupted. His face flushed, and the anger drained into something quieter, smaller. Shame. He wouldn't look at me. I stepped closer, but I kept my voice steady. "This isn't about proving anything," I said. "It never was." He scoffed weakly. "You always wanted recognition." I shook my head. "No," I said. "I wanted respect, and I stopped needing it from you a long time ago." I didn't insult him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't list everything he'd taken from me. "I didn't do this to be seen," I continued. "I did it because it was right. That's what success looks like to me." Family, I realized in that moment, wasn't about who claimed authority. It was about who showed up without conditions. And for the first time, my worth wasn't something he got to define. The anger didn't last long. It burned hot for a moment, then collapsed under its own weight. My father turned his face toward the wall, jaw tight, like if he didn't look at me, the truth might lose its shape. His voice dropped, rough and defensive. "This doesn't mean anything," he muttered. "Anyone could have done that." But even he didn't believe it. When he spoke again, the rage was gone. What replaced it was worse. Something thin and exposed. Shame he didn't have the language for. I didn't take a victory lap. I didn't remind him of every time he'd called me a failure. I spoke quietly. "This wasn't about you," I said, "and it wasn't about fixing our relationship." He scoffed weakly. "Then why?" "Because helping someone doesn't require permission," I answered, "and it doesn't require approval." I let that sit. I'm not a failure because I didn't become who you imagined, I continued. I'm successful because I chose who I am. Family, I realized, isn't the person who judges you from the bed. It's the person who acts with integrity when no one is watching. And in that room, I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt finished. Weeks later, life didn't explode into something new. It simply settled. The hospital calls became less frequent, updates shorter, clinical. Recovery was happening, slow, measured, out of my hands now. The crisis that had once filled every hour loosened its grip. I didn't visit as often, not out of spite, out of clarity. When I did go, the room felt different, quieter, smaller. The man in the bed no longer spoke with certainty about my life. Sometimes he didn't speak at all. We existed in a new shape, one without expectations. Outside the hospital, my days stayed ordinary. I went to work, I answered emails, I cooked dinner. I slept through the night without bracing for the next comment, the next comparison. Nothing about my life looked dramatic. And that was the point. Stability replaced tension. Distance replaced obligation. Peace replaced approval. The relationship didn't heal, but it stopped hurting. And for the first time, that was enough. The last thing I did was return the bracelet. It was plain plastic, slightly stretched from weeks of wear, my name printed in faded ink. I slid it off my wrist at the desk, watched it drop into the bin, and felt the weight leave with it. As I walked down the hallway, the air smelled the same as it always had. Clean, sterile, indifferent. The doors opened, light spilled in. I stepped outside without looking back. Success, I realized, was never about earning someone's approval. It was about acting in alignment with who you are, even when no one is clapping. Love isn't validation. If it demands performance, it isn't love. And power isn't volume. The loudest voice in the room isn't the one holding things together. My father called me a failure like it was a verdict. Now I understand it was an invitation to stop performing, to stop waiting, to live with integrity instead. And once I accepted that, I was free.